Hey there, good Monday to everybody out there. It is Memorial Day Monday. I'm your buddy Choppadong. We're going to do a little MLB DFS made easy today for the early slate, the main slate, the 1 p.m. slate, and we're going to play some baseball. So let's dive in real quick. We don't have a lot of time, and let's try and get everything figured out. So I'm going to take a little twist today, kind of towards the end, and I'm going to build for cash, I'm going to build for hybrids, and I'm going to build for GPPs, and I'll show you a little bit of all of the tools that we use along the way. So come on in, grab a notepad, follow me. I'll show you a quick and easy process you can repeat every single day. But it all starts with being a VIP at DFSArmy.com. One-stop shopping, all things daily fantasy sports. If you've seen us this week, we've been smashing. We're third-party rated in accuracy, first in NBA, first in NHL, second in PGA, second in MLB. NASCAR's always on the leaderboard, and with all of the new qualifiers, we're getting back to being on the NASCAR. That's 5 freaking sports. And to unlock them all, you have to be a VIP at DFSArmy.com. So use the coupon code SHOP, click the link in the description while you like and subscribe the video and all that good stuff, and head on over and get unlocked for today so that you can get in here and play all of those sports next week. We posted 5 or 6 5-figure wins and a 6-figure win among our members. So we are rocking and rolling. It's never been a better time to be part of DFSArmy.com. The tools that I'm going to show you, I start off with the research station each and every time. I dive into FanDuel because it's a little bit easier. I use the pitchers. I unlock everybody on the slate I want to play, and today that's the 1 o'clock games down to the 5 o'clock games. We slide over to the old chop shop, and we sort by descending order. Piece of cake. Those guys at the top, Burns, Tyon, Velasquez, Carolina if you want him, Bundy. These are the guys over 500 that I'm going to be looking at to include in my lineups. More my tournament lineups than my cash game lineups, because my cash game lineups, I'm just going to eat the chalk at pitcher. Right? Probably Corbin Burns, fine, eat it, move on, no big deal. And you can set that up really quickly in Domination Station or any optimizer that you choose. But when it comes to making those slight little pivots, I consider these other guys. Somebody like a James Tyon, who is, $3,000 cheaper, but has, he's got a significantly lower strikeout potential matchup. This K scores 100 points underneath Corbin Burns. But you might decide you want to save the $3,000 and take the run on it. Go for it. That's up to you. I don't mind it. You want to stay down here in the $8,000 range, you're not that much different than even a Tyon if you don't like the matchup. These are the things that we're going to consider, but I have no reason to be down here with your Quiddy and Erod and Morton and that stuff, right? Some slates you do have to consider those guys, but this isn't one of them. So those are the top 4 guys right there, top 4 or 5 guys that I would be using in most of my tournament lineups today as well. Now, I'm going to go largest to smallest again on the W score, and this is where I'm going to find guys to pick on. Tyon is a very risky pick. If he has a high K score and a high W score, you don't know what you're going to get. You get a good strikeout matchup, but you give up a lot of WOBA against and an offense that can put the WOBA on him. So I'm telling you, it could go either way. I won't be shocked if he ends up in the nut lineup. I won't be shocked if he ends up getting blown up and not going more than a couple of innings. That's the risk you're taking. So I might even reserve him in this kind of the risky, rewardy type structure. Cash games are the safest. Hybrid lineups are kind of in between. And GPPs are the risky lineups. I would save him probably for GPP. I don't even know that I would put him in a hybrid situation because I still need to play a little bit safe, especially if you've ever Googled my ladder system. Just Google DFS Army ladder up or ladder system or whatever. You'll find the article. It's a free article. It shows you how to layer contests for upside, but you're still going to play with some element of safety in those contests. So that hybrid lineup kind of used for those ladders, I don't know that I would use a Tyon, right? I would probably stick up towards the, Corbin Burns and whatever else, and probably just bypass the high risk type stuff because I don't need it to win money in those contests. Now, when I do look again, I see Velasquez is on this list. These guys up high are the guys that I'm going to key on because they're the guys that are in the matchups that could implode. So Atlanta, Houston, Tampa, Minnesota, Phillies, Reds, those are the types of stacks that I'm looking for high on that list. And in my 100-man leagues that I'm getting back to teaching my VIPs how to play this month, my 100-man leagues, these are the types of things I key on. I'm not as worried about ownership. I'm not as worried about eating chalk. I do that for cash games. I do that for ladders and leagues and things. But if I'm just going to play the 100-man leagues flying solo or the hundo on DK, I'm going to take some risk and I'm going to use something like a W score. I'm not going to play the big ownership leverage game. I don't need to. If I land on the chalk, I land on the chalk. I'll be different somewhere. I'm not as concerned about it. But I am going to pay attention to what pitchers might get torched, and these are the guys I'm going to write down, and these are the teams I'm probably going to stack most of the time. Okay? So now that you've got a couple of stacks to key on and you've got some pitchers to key on, let's move into the hot hitters. So the next section, I take this, I do the same thing. I cut the time out, so I'm only looking at the slate that I want to be dealing with, and I come over here to the WOBA and the ISO trends, and I want to double dip that power. I want high WOBA. That has some on-base side to it. It's a sliding scale. Anything over 400 on a short sample like 7 days is great. It means the guy is hot. I want him to stay hot for day 8, day 9, whatever, when I'm using him. I don't care what he does on day 10 yet. I'll reevaluate that tomorrow. I want him to be hot today. And so by staying on this short sample, baseball is a game of hot streaks. I want to ride that streak before his pricing catches up to him and create that value in my lineups. I double dip though because the WOBA has power numbers in it, of course. A double's worth more than a single. But the ISO double dips that power and really lets me know who's thumping the baseball. So I'm looking for higher than 200 over there in the 7-day column when it comes to the ISO. If I've got over a 400 here and over a 200 here, I like the guy. So like a Freddie Freeman, 393 over 14 days, 399, it's about the same, right? It's up a little bit off his 30-day numbers. His ISO is staying about the same, but he still qualifies. That's good because it shows that he's a steady producer. He might be cash game viable because he's a consistent producer, right? A Rafael Devers, who's a 428 and a 497, he's heating up still. 398, 428, 497, ascending, ascending, ascending. Power numbers, 350, 380, 420, ascending, ascending, ascending. He's still getting hot. His price has not caught up to him yet, 3,700 for the production he has given us the last week or two is too cheap. It's not going to work every day, but it's too cheap for that sample size, okay? So these are the numbers we're going to key on. God forbid we use a Hunter Renfroe, who was a 374, 30, and now a 730, a 250, 250, and now a 580. Talk about a guy who's ascending. Talk about a guy at 2,500 who's too cheap for what he's doing to the baseball right now. That's somebody you need to consider. When they're in positive matchups or in GPPs, blindly roster them. They can hit anybody. When they see that beach ball coming into home plate, they can hit anybody at any given moment, and they're great tournament plays. There are also good ways to spot those cash game undervalued plays because over the course of a week or two, he is definitely outproducing that price. So you can use this for an all-encompassing way to shorten the field down to, say, 20 or 25 hot bats. Use them all in your optimizers. Boost their projections. Get that optimizer to pull even more of them forward for you to where your lineup is just loaded with the stack that you want and then all these guys in the second stack or the one-offs or whatever that you're doing. You want to do a 3x2x2 and you see 4 or 5 of these hot hitters in there. You're going to feel good about your lineup going into the day. And that's what I like to do. It's how I like to build. I think I won 2 GPPs last week alone. So I'm starting to heat up along with these numbers. It's starting to work out really, really well for those members inside DFS Army because we make these videos almost every day. Now that you've got this list, you've seen it, right? I mean, there it is, right out for you. I'm going to go into the leverage stacks. And I'm going to show you how I would key, use FanDuel, how I would key on what I'm looking for today. Total ownership. Right? You can do this a couple of different ways. I like to cast a wider net. I like to spread out over 6, 8, 10 teams and throw, 15 to 20% on my favorite couple of teams and 4 or 5% on those 8, 9, and 10 ranked teams. But I just look at total ownership. Top team right now, Minnesota should be the chalk. San Diego should be next. Milwaukee should be next. These are the top 3 teams. The 4th team looks like it's going to be a tie between New York and Philadelphia. So to break that tie, I either wait for this number to update and come back in 15 minutes or an hour, or I go into the leverage tool or the research station and I look at who has the higher W score and just pick them. Okay? But either way, my top team's going to get about 20%. My next 3 are going to get about 15% each in terms of how I'm going to stack them if I'm building 50 lineups or 100 lineups or whatever for MME type of stuff. And then I'm going to just keep going down the list. Next after that would be the 41s probably. So Cincinnati and Boston would be in there. Next after that, Oakland, Houston, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, and that gets closer. I'm not going to be using Detroit. I'm not going to be using Baltimore today. I'm not probably going to be using the Angels. I used them last night. Worked out really well. I'm not going to be using the Cubs. May or may not be using Seattle as my 10th team, but they'd only get about 5% if I did. So you can set up the optimizers to put those weighted numbers on those teams and those stacks and really start playing a little bit of that ownership game, but you're mixing and matching with lower owned teams, and that gets you differentiated enough. Another way you could do that, you could totally fade this chalky team. You could fade the top 3 chalk and start with team 4 and play teams 4 through 13. That's fine. Baseball's a funky game. Any of those teams can be the top stack of the day, and you'd gain leverage because you'd have them at much lower ownership. You can use our leverage rankings. This takes all of this into consideration. You could just play the top 5 teams here or the top 10 teams here and do the same thing. Put weights on them for you so you've got more of the top teams and less of the other teams that should not theoretically generate the leverage, so that when these teams do smash, you gain all that leverage in all of your tournaments. Whatever it is that you do, form a routine and stick to it. And don't change that routine very often, okay? Because that's how you're going to win. Now, I would take those in full stacks in GPPs. I don't stack in cash games, right? I might max it at 2 players or 3 on FanDuel, 3 on DraftKings for sure. And I'm really only playing. I don't want to be pigeonholed into one specific offense where if that only produces 2 runs for me, it takes out 40% of my team with it. That's not good for cash games where I don't need to take a lot of risk. You had Clayton Kershaw last night. You could have still cashed very easily in a 50-50 or a double up with Clayton Kershaw in your lineup as long as you had some other bats, because he sunk 25% of lineups, but he was like 50% owned. You know? So you could still fight your way to the top. You can't win a GPP that way. So with a GPP, you have to stack harder. You have to take some chances on some pitchers. You have to maybe go a full 4 or 5 stack on FanDuel or DraftKings respectively. In the 100-man leagues, which I'm telling you is what I'm going to kind of focus on here for the next couple of minutes, I'm not doing that. I might run a lot of 3-2-2s on FanDuel. I might run, 2-2-2s. I'm not often for stacking. I don't think that it matters as much. I saw last night the top 5 or 6 teams in the 100-man league I was in were, there was a 4 stack in there. There was a lot of 3x2s in there. There were some 2x2s in there. There were some entirely all one-offs in there. It just matters on picking the right numbers, the right bats. And you don't need as high a score to win a 100-man league as you do a big 30,000 person GPP. So you can you got some flexibility, you got some freedom. You don't need the leverage of taking somebody like, who did I say I wasn't going to play today, the Angels or something like that, because you're just too low owned. You don't need to concentrate on them and take that gamble. You can stay up closer to those other teams that were up here on the ownership list. You can play Minnesota or San Diego or Milwaukee and do just fine in a 100-man league. So the way I'm going to set this optimizer up is I'm going to build 10 lineups, a couple of uniques, a little bit of randomness, and start by cranking off a minimum ownership of 250. That way I'm going to see some high ownership lineups that generally ride within the herd. I'm establishing this top end number for a very specific reason. I'm calculating the numbers just underneath that. They're going to be chalky with a twist. That's what wins you 100-man leagues, okay? So when I'm kicking in this, I'm trying to build 10 lineups. I didn't get 10. It said I don't have enough. So I need to come down and make this a little bit lower owned, maybe a 230, and try that for 10 lineups. And it says not enough. So I got to come down even a little bit lower again. It usually gets me around 200s about where I can start. So I'm doing this just to show you when I get too high what I would end up doing. And it sounds like it's building lineups now. So as it's building these lineups, I'm going to see what the top of the lineup is. Probably going to be around 225%, 226%. Only 4 teams generated this time. Fine. If I had more time, I'd give you all 10 lineups, but it doesn't matter. I can sort this by percentage ownership, get a 223 or a 224. Now, for my 100-man leagues, I'm going to use 3x2x2 or 2x2x2 type formations. I'm not going to worry about chalk. I'm not going to worry about what I'm going to build a high-ish owned lineup. I'm not going to take massive risk with Giants or with, Angels or whatever. I'm going to largely stay here and pick up even chalk at my one-offs. It's going to be different enough for me. So I'm going to try and get down to around 20% or so off. Kind of like think of a discount, right? So get down to like 180, maybe 170. That's the sweet spot I'm trying to build lineups around. And when I do that and I set up all of my stacks in this feature here, and then I click optimize, it's going to give me my 3x2x2s or my 2x2x2s, but it's going to be building those lineups over the 170 mark. So I'm going to be chalky, but I'm going to be just underneath the total chalk, and that's what's going to create that difference in these lineups when they do pair up and they get lined up, and they're at a 1-8 perfect number. That's how you win 100-man leagues. If you want more details, you got to come inside dfsarmy.com. Use that coupon code CHOP, C-H-O-P. Get that discount put in place and come talk to me. I'll help you become a better MLB DFS player.